Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Esther here. Esther, you're somebody that has been studying, analyzing, and trying to figure out the ways to help people with back pain for a long time. You've helped come up with this incredible system that has been talked about in books and other avenues that's really been tremendous in alleviating stress and pain for people. And I'm excited to have you here talk about your journey, how your passion for this area formed, and what you're up to now.
Well, where shall I start? I came at
Well,
this, where I am now is at a very comfortable juncture where I have managed to delegate a lot of my everyday responsibilities to a very capable team so that it opens up the possibility for me to think about a next project. And it's been a while. So that's an unusual juncture, but really comfortable.
awesome. So, how did your interest in this area even begin? Like, did you have back pain yourself and you're like, I need
Very
to figure
much
out how to
so.
solve this? You couldn't figure out how to solve it?
Yeah, like a lot of people who arrive at their passions, I came at it the hard way. So when I was 9 months pregnant with my first child, I had an L5-S1 disc herniation.
Ah,
And I tried all the conservative things and the alternative things and just wasn't getting anywhere. Finally, I had surgery. Um, and that helped. But within a year, I had a reherniation of the same disc. And so I faced the same horrible situation that millions of people face. It's a very sort of embarrassing area of medicine. It's the number
mm,
one cause of global disability, and there isn't a good solution. Not in conservative medicine, not in alternative medicine. Statistically speaking, nothing works well. And that's what I experienced firsthand. So after the first surgery, I had a reherniation. I was being offered another surgery. I was in my mid-20s. This does not bode well. And I was unable to carry my child.
mm.
I was unable to carry a cooking pot without feeling twinges down my leg. It was quite horrible.
Yeah.
It's not something you wish on a new parent. And so I had two choices: to live life as a cripple or cast an even wider net to try to find a solution. Because I tried most of them. And so I was fortunate. Upbringing in India, my Dutch mom, Indian father raised me to sort of pick the best from all sorts of cultures.
Mhm.
And that's what has served me well. It's what my technique's about. Like, look at people who actually function well. What are they doing differently? What can we learn from them? How can we incorporate those pieces of wisdom into our bodies? And it turns out that it's something we all used to have when we were little kids, and that our ancestors had, and that our counterparts in some non-industrial cultures still have. And sort of secrets of the body, very simple secrets, little tweaks, but huge results, because posture is something you're doing all day, every day. So if you do it right, you're in effect healing yourself all day.
So, Esther, how did you find out about these techniques? Was this just like a big kind of research binge you went on, like trying to just figure out what can I do myself to help myself? And how did it become like a method, like this whole method you put together?
So I started by studying other people's methods. And the things that resonated for me were things that send you back to your own body and how you're using it. My mother would always point out in India admirable things like fruit vendors, vegetable vendors who carry these large loads on their heads all day and don't have problems. And these are not Popeye muscle kind of people. These are lean body people, and they're doing these things all day, every day. The sweeper who swept our house, she pointed that out, and these things lodged in my brain. So when I was casting an ever wider net to find some things that would help. The things that resonated for me were things that dovetailed with my early experience in India, things that have to do with wisdom of the body, with revisiting how you are architecting, sculpting, moving your body. And so there are several techniques that are worthwhile. I admire Alexander technique and Feldenkrais method. And the one I got the most from was aplomb. So my teacher, Noel Perez, had spent time in India with BKS Iyengar of yoga fame, who happened to also be a family friend, and learned a lot from Iyengar, learned a lot from an early French anatomist. And so I was very influenced by her teaching. And then having a scientific background, I was educated at Harvard and Princeton. Biochemistry was my major, so a very strong scientific base. And I needed to understand the logical underpinnings. And I did research in the medical literature, and then put together a methodology. How do you get people from here to there in an efficient way, in a way that sticks? And that's what I can take credit for, is I've created a method. But a lot of the insights I got from Noel Perez and from other people who study indigenous cultures, and people who work successfully in their bodies, physically speaking. So, and I was already a practicing acupuncturist.
Yeah.
So I had a natural lab. A lot of people come to acupuncture with back pain. And so I got to teach them little snippets and try certain things out, try metaphors, try techniques, I would add in a little 15-minute session onto my acupuncture sessions. And so slowly I started seeing that, this is what people need. They need to relearn how to be in their body, to move the way we're meant to. And so I became more of a posture educator and movement educator, and came to the point where I was spread very thin. And I let my acupuncture license go inactive. And now I spend all my time trying to reach people the solution to back pain that actually works.
How long did it take, Esther, to go from idea of like, I can need to find a better solution to this, build up your own method, to actually publishing a book on this and a system for people to follow? Like, what was that time frame? When did you feel like you were comfortable enough to put out a book on this?
Well, my back problems happened in 1986, 87. My book was published in 2008. So,
Wow.
what is that? That's 10 years. It incubated a long time. After I found my own solution, I went on to have 2 more children. No problems whatsoever. I haven't had a backache or a back twinge in over 35 years now.
Wow.
So it was a pretty dramatic case study. And we have many, many, many. So because I was raising my kids, and because kids are one of the model populations we use, I was taking photographs of my kids. They were my subjects and my kids. And so I could, I took my time, and I think that's one of the reasons it was well cooked. It took a long time. I wasn't in any hurry. I didn't have anyone breathing down my back to put out V1 or to put my product in the market. I was working at home and part-time, and it was my lab. So I got to evolve it organically.
So as you're getting this out there, how did you effectively get like kind of distribution and get people to, buy the book? And like, what did that look like? I mean, was it initially you had a big spike, or was this like a couple year journey to become a bestseller?
Well, again, I had an advantage in having cooked it a long time. I had quite a following around where I lived, which happens to be Stanford campus. So I had a lot of faculty, I had a lot of people in Palo Alto, a lot of people, Silicon Valley people. So I had people volunteer to tell me how I should run my business. I had people donate to, most recently, to a study that's being done to compare the Gokhale method with physical therapy. It's done at Stanford, and the chief of physical medicine and rehab needed $350,000 to make the study happen. And that was me calling up recent students, asking them if they would be interested in supporting. And they wanted to see the results that they had reach a wider audience. So we were able to put together 350,000 in donations to Stanford, and that study is underway. So it has served me well, actually, that it got cooked slowly and thoroughly. I only just this September published the second edition. And I would say there's relatively little change in the book. There are some important changes, but given that it was a 15-year plus gap, it's striking how little, and also typos and things. There just weren't many. We cooked things well, we cooked things slowly, and it grew organically. So I had a base of people. I had a friend who gave me advice on how I should publish this book. I had one of my students volunteer to be temporary CEO. Her husband was running MSN, Bill Gates' right-hand person at the time. And she had been to MIT, MBA. And so, I had all these incredibly well-qualified people giving me time, giving me advice. I remember her saying, there was the Book Expo America, and she said, if you were 25, I would have you hop on a plane and attend that conference. And I thought, I'm hopping on that plane and attending that conference. Never mind that I'm not 25. And that was actually how the book got distribution, because I attended. At that time, it was very desirable to have a publisher, and Rodale Press looked like the choice publisher. But they didn't want to do a color book. They wanted a black and white book, and my book was already fully written. 1,100 color images. Very important that they speak. These are all these photographs from field work in Africa and so on. And so this was not very encouraging that I would have to put those away. So I just went to this series, a panel of distributors, and I went to the one that looked the most promising, and showed him my manuscript, and he said, are you a doctor? I said, no, but we have a lot of MDs recommending this. And there was a whole page of high-level MD testimonials. And he said, wow, you really have this wrapped up. And then he saw J.M. Coetzee, the Nobel Prize winner in literature, wrote a very nice testimonial. And he was a literature professor. And he said, okay, the advantage of being the CEO of an organization is you can make decisions like this. I'm taking you on. And that was a big coup, so we had distribution. We had, in those days, it was very valuable. Nowadays, most bookstores don't exist anymore. And, you're mostly selling through Amazon anyway. It's not as much of a deal. But I had lots of little tailwinds like this that just helped. So the book did well. And then again, organically, we had a student who did really well, whose sister was a New York Times writer. And he had one of those miraculous recoveries. He had been to two, he had been recommended fusion surgery at Stanford by two neurosurgeons. And he read the book, and that was the first good night's sleep he had had in a year. And then he took the course, and he was back to marathoning and all his usual activities. So very dramatic recovery, which is not unusual, by the way. Anyway, his sister took note, and she took my course in Boston. Their father took my course in Boston, and she spent a whole year trying to get this article published in the New York Times. And the editor kept saying, no, you need a sexier testimonial. And I was serving her up Susan Wojcinski, who was a big fan of the method. Somehow that wasn't adequate for her editor. Joan Baez, no, that didn't work. Desmond Tutu, no, that wouldn't work. So finally, who made the story happen was Matt Drudge. It was hilarious that would be, he had been quiet for 7 years, and Drudge of Drudge Report, and he took my course, and he was very taken by the method, and he decided to speak publicly for the first time in 7 years, and that made the story happen. So it's a lot of quirky things like this, and we could afford to wait and let things happen organically. And that drove the book to number 3 on all of Amazon for a whole weekend. So we had lots of good things like that happen in spikes. And we really didn't know what we were doing very much, in marketing and in making a website, harvest email addresses and all this business speak. I had no business background whatsoever. I was counting on advice from well-wisher clients, students, and that can get you only so far. But now I have a really hardworking, enthusiastic team. And so we've decided it's time to get out there again. COVID hit us hard, but there too, there was an opportunity. That's what helped us realize that online teaching, one-on-one, works extremely effectively. So that's a new offering, which now lets us reach people worldwide. Huge. So
Well, after the book got like traction and got some success, what was that like for you? How did you handle that? What was that next period like?
well, I'm still learning to celebrate better.
Mhm.
I'm always looking for what's not right and what needs to be improved and so on. I have a team that celebrates well, so they co-opt me into celebrations, and I've become better about that. But I tend to just look at what needs to be done, what can be done better. So people would keep saying you've already reached success. We sold 300,000 books after that New York Times article came out. It was front page of the business section and so on. So, but I know what the statistics are like with back pain. I know how many hundreds of millions of people are suffering. And so getting 300,000 people reading my book it doesn't touch what needs to happen, because we actually have a solution. This actually works, and it's not that much money, and it's no equipment, and it's hardly any time spent. It's not menus of exercises that people have to do every day and carve time out for away from their lives. That we actually teaching what I call life exercises. So it's the way you walk and the way you bend and the way you sit that provide the stretches and the strengthenings and the tweaks that you need in your architecture to be pain-free.
Mm.
This whole notion of having to exercise to get out of pain. It's not, I'm not dissing it, but that's not the main dish, because you can never do enough reps. No sane person is going to be able to do the number of reps that nature arranges for you to get if you walk right. If you walk right, every step is a rep for your glutes, for your foot muscles, every step is a stretch for your psoas, for your calf. And so you don't have to depend on little extra exercises tacked onto the day.
So what's your day-to-day like now, Esther? What's the focus at this point? I know you just kind of put out another version in the book. What is the priority now?
Well, I'm always busy with figuring out how to teach more efficiently
Hmm.
and have it be stickier. So one of the things that we did during COVID, it was actually just before COVID, I got very impatient with not being able to provide people good follow-up. They would
Mm.
wax lyrical about what they'd learned in their courses, and the courses are just 6 lessons in person, 18 lessons, each one 13 minutes long. We don't ask a lot from people. It's tiny amounts of investment, but then they would forget. They would slide back, they would regress. And I had been really frustrated with how to keep them from slipping and sliding back. And January 1st, 2020, I decided, okay, I'm going to show up online and I'm going to teach little tiny bits of things to remind all our alumni of what they learned however many eons ago. And I got extremely positive feedback on that. So I decided, okay, we'll do this 21-day challenge. We'll run it again. I was traveling, and so it was easy to just replay that 21-day challenge. And people would say things like, oh my goodness, now I understand what you mean by rib anchor. Now I understand what bean shape feet mean.
Mm.
Now I'd forgotten completely about inner core set. And so I realized that these little snippets were landing well. And then COVID hit. So, first of all, we realized people desperately need connection and can use exercise because I was teaching these little snippets embedded in some form of exercise, yoga, dance, ordinary fitness type exercises. Yeah. And so I realized, okay, they can't go to their gyms now. They need the exercise. They need the connection. So we kept that program running. And to this day, now 5 years later, we have not missed a single day.
Amazing.
Right? So every day we have now 1 to 3 programs. Dance happens every single day because that turns out to be a really good way to revisit posture principles and also have fun and connection and listen to great music. It's been a fantastic program. And I started out teaching all of them, every day for 18 months. I didn't miss a single day. But now we have a whole team of our teachers teaching different days, and they bring variety and they bring a different voice, and it's just become richer and better. So that's something we keep improving and tweaking. How do we keep people entertained, educated, and reminded, because until all of society is beaming it to them, they need these reminders. So we try to provide them. So that's a program that we're still busy tweaking, and we continue our online teaching and we recruit teachers all over the world. So, but I'm looking for yet more ways to teach and land these just all important pieces, nuggets of wisdom into people's bodies. So, now with technology evolving rapidly, there are all kinds of possibilities. So I'm now educating myself in how else I might teach.
Well, Esther, that was all the questions that I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think it's amazing that you had this problem, you figured out a solution for it, and then you like scaled that solution to tons of other people that have this issue. And there's a lot more obviously to go to, but you've already touched the lives of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And you mentioned these different methods you're figuring out of how to scale this. I'm excited to see those come to life and what will happen next, and people that will and kind of a new generation without back pain. I mean, that would be awesome. So
Would
thanks for
love
coming on.
Thank you so much.